traversing the strange world with peace and toodles.
All right, Rico Cortes is a teacher who has been studying the history of the Bible and the history of Judaism for over 25 years. I have invited him to come on here today to talk about the Pharisees in the times of Jesus.
Hey, Isaiah, how are you, man?
Hey, Rico, how's it going? Thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. You're moving a lot. Just bouncing everywhere.
It's my laptop. It's sitting on my lap.
Yeah. I just got back from Israel, so I'm still trying to catch up with the jet lag going on.
Right on. And where all did you visit over there?
Well, we had a tour. We had a 15-day tour. We went to, we did like all around. We went to the Golan all the way to the north. We saw the border with Lebanon, and then we saw the border with Syria. Then we stayed in the Galilee area for a few days. Then we drove down to Masada. We went by the border of Jordan. Then we went up to Jerusalem. We also took a trip to what they call the West Bank, but it's actually the mountains of Samaria. And there was no issues. We only heard the alarm once when we were in Jerusalem, but nothing really happened. It's safer than people think. Unfortunately, the news, they go above and beyond to do more scare tactics. So, we shouldn't be afraid. I had a great time.
Good. So, in the New Testament, we are given this image of this relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees. He's often opposing them. It would seem as though they're the spiritual, philosophical opposites of Jesus. For example, in Matthew 23:23, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you tithe mint, cumin, and dill, and you have overlooked the more important matters of the law, mercy, justice, and faith. These are necessary for you to have done, and these very things by no means should you have left undone." So, with the experience that I have, like any writings of the rabbis that I have read, and I know that you've studied very extensively on this, there's wisdom that I've heard from the rabbis where they put an emphasis on mercy, justice, and faith. Very, very, very strong emphasis. So could you give us a context as to who Jesus in the New Testament, in the Gospels, who is he talking about specifically?
Well, I mean, it's a little difficult, Isaiah, because people don't realize that there were 7 types of Pharisees in the first century. And it's like, how many Christian denominations are there? How many branches of Judaism do we have today? It's the same problem. In the first century, you have different sects. You have the Nazarenes, you have the Essenes, you have the Herodians, which was a political entity. You have the Pharisees. And within the Pharisees, you have different branches. Okay, and within those branches of the Pharisees, you have 2 houses of school, 2 schools of thought. You have the house of Shammai, which is a little bit more strict, more middle of the road, no flexibility. Then you have the house of Hillel. Now, in the New Testament, it's interesting because as you read throughout the Gospels, you pretty much know from what branch the rabbi is from. For example, there's a story in the Gospels, I think it's the book of Mark, that Yeshua goes to the synagogue, and there's a woman who has a condition. She is bent over for 12 years.
Yes.
And they're not allowed to pray for her. The leader of the congregation gets upset because Yeshua prayed for the woman on Shabbat. And by the way, even in today's synagogue, they always open the space for praying for the sick.
Yes.
But in the first century, the house of Shammai, which was in control of the Sanhedrin Council, the major rulings there, the president of the Sanhedrin Council, which is the equivalent to our Supreme Court.
Yes.
They actually gave an interpretation of the Bible that on Shabbat, you don't pray for the sick. That's why many things that Yeshua did was actually counterculture to what they were saying that was against the essence of the Torah, the commandments of God. Yeshua is not challenging the law, the commandments. He is challenging this interpretation that is devoid of righteousness and justice, which is basically the essence of the Torah, is righteousness and justice. Psalm 89:14 says, Mishpat v'sadakah, righteousness and justice is the foundation of God's throne. So what people sometimes need to realize, and the perfect example is the chapter that you just read. When you go to Matthew 23, Yeshua says something to seem controversial or contradictory to what modern day Christians say. He says, then Yeshua spoke to the crowd and to his disciples saying, the scribes and the Pharisees, they sit on the seat of Moses, meaning they have authority. Okay? Mm-hmm. Therefore, do and observe everything they tell you, but do not do as they do.
Yes.
So the question is, what were they telling you? And second, what were they doing that Yeshua was having an issue with it? Now, when you read the whole chapter, and by the way, every Hebrews person I know, they use this to say Yeshua is against Judaism or the rabbis. Mm-hmm. That's not true. It's far from being true.
Many of those conversations.
Right. But and the Christians completely disregard the Torah altogether. They assume this verse is about getting rid of anything related to Judaism. That's not the point. If you continue to read throughout the chapter, you're going to notice how they are trying to impose their sense of holiness above righteousness and justice. In other words, and he said it, you read the verses, you take the cumming, the tithe, and this, but you disregard the greater matters of the law, which is, what was it? What verse did you read?
Matthew 23:23.
Right. It says, it's a huge thing that he's telling them, right? He says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay the tenth of a mint and deal in cumming, and neglect the more important matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. It was necessary to do these things. What things he's talking about? Justice, mercy, and faithfulness, while not neglecting the mint, the cumming, and the dill. Yeshua is never saying not to do those things. He says, do not disregard the essence of the law, which is to love your neighbor as yourself. So when you go through the chapter, it's basically the Messiah challenging the status quo, because in the first century, you have a battle between two schools of thought. The house of Shammai, very strict, and the house of Hillel.
How would, when somebody approached Shammai and asked to become a convert, for him to teach them the Torah, what would he say?
Oh, he says, well, okay, what was it again? What will you do? The Gentile came and says, what? I want to learn the Torah. And Shammai just kicked him out, right? Standing on one foot with a broom.
Yes, yeah, he said, stand on one foot with a ruler.
Yeah, he's like, get out of here.
Recite the whole.
Right. And then he goes to and he goes to Hillel, and Hillel basically stands on one foot and says, don't do unto others what you don't like to be done unto you. And the rest is commentary. Yes.
The potential convert's challenge was, teach me the Torah whilst I'm standing on one foot.
Standing on one foot. Yes. So Shammai responded in a very disregarding manner to a Gentile who wanted to learn Torah. Yes. Hillel, on the other hand, allowed the Gentile to recognize that you're asking him to do something that you don't like to be done unto you. So the essence of the Torah is love your neighbor as yourself.
Yes.
That doesn't disregard the commandment.
He said, what is wrong to you, don't do to your fellow man.
Correct.
Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
So, and by the way, it lines up perfectly with the mindset of the first century Judaism. Yeshua is not teaching against the lifestyle of a Jew. He's teaching against the self-righteousness of a few, in this case, the house of Shammai, imposing ritual purity outside of the temple proper. Let me explain. In the first century, they had the temple. So the levels of purity, moral purity, and ritual purity clearly needed to be a requirement in order to go see yourself before the king. Anyone understands that. But because of the bad experience that happened through the times of the kings, in which they were exiled to Babylon, and the 10 tribes went to Assyria, there was a mindset that developed in Babylon. They began to develop teachings that would protect the identity of Israel amongst the nations. And I understand that, because without customs and without an identity, you don't have a culture. I get
They
that.
felt the need to build fences, per se.
Right. And the fences are not necessarily bad. But because, like, for example, in Florida, if you have a pool, you have a fence out backyard. But then the law makes you build a fence around the pool. And you're thinking, well, that's ridiculous. Why do I need a little fence around the pool? Well, because you become liable if you don't have the fence and somebody goes in the pool and they died in your pool, you're liable because there was no fence to delineate for that guy. You should not go beyond this point. It's dangerous. So the fence is not really a protection of the guy. It's a protection legally of myself, because I don't want to be sued. So the fences in reality is the way of protecting. The problem is that sometimes they put more emphasis on the fence than the person.
Yes.
And that's the issue. It happened in the Christian church. I mean, you have people in the Pentecostal church, they dress one way, they speak one way, and then they protect the way they dress more than helping the needy and the homeless and the widows. It's the same problem in every religion. And so it was in the first century. And Yeshua is really having issues, not with their observance, because he was a Jew. He's having issues with the unfairness of them putting themselves here as a high-level holiness and oppressing people that were not at the same level with things that it was impossible for them to do. By the way, today, we do the same thing in religion. Many people run away from God because of that very thing.
It would have been any teacher in any domain of belief that is, they're letting their ego lead the way. They're letting their pride. It's about rather than experiencing something greater than yourself, it's about yourself.
Well, Isaiah, I mean, think about this. Obviously, since I met you, you put in like 30, 40 pounds of muscle. You look great, by the way.
Thank you.
But when you started, you were always looking for someone who can teach you how to lift weights.
Yes.
And because it's not just picking up a weight, you have to go, there's technique, there's everything that involves dedication, work ethic, rest. It requires proper eating, and also instruction. But along the way, you saw someone that you said, man, I want that guy to teach me because I like the way he looks and the way he works out. Obviously, because the way you look is a byproduct of how you do the exercise.
It's byproduct.
And then all of a sudden, that guy who's been training for so long is expecting you to do something that you're not equipped to do. And on top of it, he makes you feel like trash because he already had it. And he's not patient with you. He expects you to go from here to here right away. Well, guess what? I'm pretty sure you don't want to work out with that dude again.
No, well, to a certain extent, it's good to have like a trainer that holds you to a high standard. But no, if it's
not to make you feel like trash.
Yeah, you're a newborn basically, and they're trying to feed you the whole foods,
Right. So that's what happened in the first century. You have people living outside the temple. And these particular Pharisees, which, by the way, there were 7 types of Pharisees. So which one of the Pharisees he's talking to? Because he was very friendly to Nicodemus. The Messiah was very friendly with Nicodemus. He was a Pharisee. Paul was a Pharisee of the house of Hillel. How do I know? Because Gamaliel was a grandson of Hillel. Huh?
Gamaliel, No, I was about to point that out. Gamaliel was the, like you said, grandson of Hillel?
The grandson of Hillel.
Yes.
So now you know why Paul was so friendly towards the Gentiles, because Hillel and Gamaliel were friendly towards the Gentiles converting. So that makes sense.
For our listeners who aren't familiar, Gamaliel, he is mentioned in the New Testament. The Pharisees had taken, I believe it was Peter and John aside. They were beating them, persecuting them, telling them not to preach. And they were asking what should be done with these men. And
Right.
Gamaliel said, let them go, because perhaps we don't want to be found fighting against God, which
Right.
tracks.
Well, yeah, but
from the school
let me
of Hillel, which, go ahead.
well, let me break that down a little bit more, because something I did research on that. I'm thinking that's pretty odd that these people listen to Gamaliel. And then I read the book Jesus the Pharisee by Rabbi Falk, and I found out through history that Gamaliel was the head of the Sanhedrin Council. He was actually the top authority of the judicial body. That's the reason why when he spoke, everyone listened to him and let him go. He had the final vote in any decision. Now, what's really peculiar about that whole event is people don't realize that the gospel message that was actually spoken right there by Peter and John in the Sanhedrin Council. It says that, the council. And basically, they found no fault. So they were let go. They beat them up a little bit, but they let them go and says, don't preach in that name. There's no commandment in the Torah that says that you cannot teach in the name of your rabbi.
No,
right?
no.
So, but why did they have such an objection with the name of Yeshua? Because remember, Yeshua resurrected. The message was an anti-imperial message. Presenting Yeshua as a resurrected king or future king was an affront to the authority of the Roman Empire and the authority of the Herod, who was the king. Therefore, it would have caused a civil war. So they were trying to keep any problem with the Roman Empire. They want to continue the status quo. So when you understand the whole event with Peter and John in the council, how Gamaliel stood up and defended them, Isaiah, that's a huge deal, because it's like me going to the Knesset in Israel, and they give me a platform to present the innocence of the guilt of Yeshua of the kangaroo court that they did to him in the first century. And by the way, I proposed this to a rabbi. I had a conversation with an Orthodox rabbi about 2 years ago. I said, Rabbi, a year ago, I talked to him and said, Rabbi, let me ask you this. According to the Torah law, everything that happened in the gospel in regards to the case against Yeshua is a kangaroo court. And when I explained to him, because he knows the Torah and the Mishnah, he says, yeah, you're right. No one can meet at night and execute death penalties. They have to do it between 9 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon. They cannot meet on the Sabbath or the feast. And we know that the Messiah was judged right before Passover. So therefore, it was an illegal court case. And I told him, I said, if I would have an opportunity to present this to the courts, notwithstanding that they have to believe that he's the Messiah. We can put that on the side, because I know they're not going to believe in him as the Messiah. But if we just present the case as him who was unjustly accused, I was murdered, can we prove a case that what they did was a kangaroo court? And he told me yes. So, because we have to follow proper procedure. Well, the same thing happens with the Pharisees. Yeshua was never taking issue with the law itself. He was taking issue with their interpretation to the extreme manner. He's saying, you're removing yourself from the essence and the spirit of the law to do righteousness and justice. The commandments of God is not to oppress you, it's to deliver you from oppression, to give you freedom so you can make the proper choices to live a prosperous life. And this is the reason why many people go running away from God, and they want no connection with him, because we do a terrible job presenting the good news of the gospel, and we impose things that are difficult for anyone to follow. And that's where I was 10 years ago, actually 15 years ago. And I went back to college, and that's why I focus on my academic and understanding these things, because we can cause problems by preaching what we think is true. And we are oppressing people just like the Pharisees, the sect of the Pharisee movement did in the first century. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, gatekeepers. He was against the gatekeepers who were using the structure of that system to exact power upon other people. Rather, when Jesus would have said the blessings of the prosperity, the abundance that Torah brings your life, That
Right.
should be the emphasis, to live life more abundantly, with
Well,
peace with your fellow man.
Well, that's the whole idea. I mean, you got to remember the Torah is a book made up of values. Let's take the book of Leviticus, for example. The book of Leviticus, which is probably one of the most neglected books in the whole Christian world and also in Judaism. Okay? Believe it or not, it's not a focus of study, even within Judaism. Only certain branches of Judaism study a little bit. And I know because I was in Israel and I asked. Okay, I've known this for 10 years, but I've been going back to Israel. I asked the rabbi, I say, how much of a focus is the book of Leviticus? They, well, we study it, but in certain branches, they study it more than others. But in Christianity, you'd be hard-pressed to have people really study Leviticus. The Hebrew roots, forget it. They don't even look at it.
More so studying like the Targums, the Mishnah, the interpretation surrounding it, rather than just I kind of see that as like, wouldn't that be like the equivalent as the New Testament to a Christian? They put more of an emphasis on the New Testament than.
Well, it's the same problem. I mean, you got to remember, I was reading an article today and watching a video by this guy who's a Jewish guy from Hebrew University. And he just wrote a book in Hebrew that I have to buy and try to get translation. He just wrote a book actually teaching how Jewish the New Testament is. And I had already a friend of mine who was Orthodox. He's a scholar. He's still very observant. He told me, he goes, I'm studying first century Judaism in the New Testament. He doesn't believe in Yeshua, but he knows that Yeshua was Jewish and that the whole New Testament is a Jewish book. And unfortunately, we have compartmentalized the New Testament as being separate from everything else. And what we've done, we have taken the Torah and make it evil. Oh, it's to bondage and it's not free. When in fact, the New Testament is now going to be better understood. It's going to be better understood if you know the Torah. I mean, there are many things that you cannot understand in the New Testament unless you know cultural background, languages of the first century, and also the Torah command. So Paul was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was teaching them the Torah. Remember, the New Testament did not exist as a book when Paul was teaching those people. So what was he teaching them from? From the Torah and the prophets, and also the interpretation of a Pharisee that he was.
So for our audience, when Paul says every scripture is God breathed in the New Testament, I think that is 1 Corinthians, I want to say. No. Timothy, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All scriptures for instruction and for the canons of the New Testament came later. The letters were written by Paul and even Luke much later. That doesn't mean that the New Testament is not valid. God forbid. I think it is, more so than ever. The problem is that sometimes we have a disconnect of the timetable. For example, Acts 21 occurred 28 years after Yeshua died and resurrected. Chapter 10 of the book of Acts, Cornelius, occurred approximately a decade after the resurrection. We assume that Yeshua
certainly
resurrected.
Certainly are not given that, yeah.
No, they don't want to tell you that. Because then you have to...
They're not given that perception.
Right. I mean, think about it, Isaiah. If I start teaching someone in the church, and I tell them, by the way, when this was written as a letter, 30 years already passed after the resurrection. So there was no New Testament. So what was Paul using to teach them about holiness, about not eating meat sacrificed to idols, about sexual behavior, in contrast to the Greco-Roman world? I mean, he's using the Torah. Unfortunately, we don't convey it that way. We have the book already compiled, so we only focus on what is there. And as a matter of fact, we have to ask the question, who is the audience he's writing to? Will he write to Corinth? Well, where was he when he wrote to Corinth? What's going on that he wrote a letter to the Corinthians? I mean, the Jews get expelled from Rome by Claudius, the emperor, and he meets Aquila and somebody, I forgot the name. there were a Jewish couple who left Rome, and now Paul is in Ephesus. Paul is in Aquila and forgot the name, and Paul is in Ephesus, writing to the Corinthians. He's in Turkey writing to the Greeks. I mean, he's using Passover language because he is actually in the time of the spring in Ephesus. So he's writing to the Corinthians in a language that they would have understood. But ask anybody in the church if they know where the letter of Corinthians was written from and what time of the year. Mind you, chapter 1 of 1 Corinthians tells you, and chapter 15 tells you too. But we never read the whole book. We take one verse from one letter, and we connect another letter with another verse, and we create a theology. Then we wonder how come we have 49,000 denominations.
This all the way over here written to these people.
Right.
This written all the way over here to these people. It's like, yeah.
But what's interesting, though, however, I asked myself that question, Isaiah. So wait a second. Why would a letter written to the Galatians, which is actually in the middle of Turkey, or a letter written to Philippi, which is in the north of modern-day Greece, on the way to Istanbul in the north, why would that be of any kind of application to my life? Well, because the principles that are taught deal with behavior, moral behavior, and the Torah is written to be applied in any place, anywhere in the world, except for certain laws that could only be applicable within the land of Israel. But fornication is fornication, and idolatry is idolatry, and adultery is adultery, murder is murder, anywhere in the world. So the essence of the Torah, which is about moral behavior, can be applied in every country in the world. You don't need to be in Jerusalem to only do it. Now, to apply ritual purity to its fullness can only be accomplished in Jerusalem when the temple was standing. And by the way, that was the problem in the first century. The Pharisees wanted to impose temple purity outside of the temple proper and Jerusalem, outside of Jerusalem, which is practically impossible. And that's why Yeshua is challenging them. He's saying, you're putting more emphasis on the outward appearance, but your heart is removed from the Lord. You are acting as if you're more self-righteous than the people, the normal folk over there, who they don't have the regular person who don't have all the experience or knowledge that you have. They're trying to live everyday life, and you want them to live to your standards, but inside of you, you're like a tomb, a whitewashed tomb. You look beautiful on the inside, but you're dead inside. He's not saying that the Torah is death. He is saying that you are not focusing on the essence of the commandments of the Lord. It's quite fascinating. When I understood this, the whole New Testament makes sense.
That would be a good, since we were just talking about Paul, that would be a good segue into my next question, because you mentioned the book Jesus the Pharisee by Rabbi Harvey Falk.
Correct.
In that book, he draws out much of what we're talking about now. The similarities Jesus had to the schools of Hillel.
Yes.
The things he opposed the school of Shammai in regards of. He believed that Paul was trying to bring the message of the God of Abraham to the Gentiles with the intention of them being Noahites. For listeners who aren't familiar with what a Noahide is,
I disagree with him on that point.
Another term is B'nai Noah, son of Noah.
Right, I disagree with him on that point.
There's only 7 laws as opposed to 613. Just to give you a little bit of context of the Noahide laws.
Yeah, but you need 69 to understand the 7 laws. You need 69 of the Torah to explain the 7. I mean, because
yes.
Yeah, because think about it.
Absolutely.
If you shed blood, right, means that you have to kill something, then your intent needs to be questioned. Did you kill somebody, or was it unintentional? Involuntary manslaughter, or was it murder? So the laws are outlined for us in Genesis for all of humanity. But in the Middle Ages, the Noahide laws were actually designed as a way to protect the Jews from the Christians the Catholics, who were persecuting the Jews. So it was a way of saying, okay, you want to convert, keep those only 7. You don't need the Torah because we don't know if you're legit or not. And by the way, this is historical fact, by the way.
Yeah.
So
keep them entertained with that to see if they're ready to move on.
And I remember a rabbi in Israel in 2004 was telling me that all I needed was the Noahide laws, and he would not budge. So I said to him, okay, fine. So how do I keep the 7 Noahide laws? Well, you need to understand 69, I guess. I don't remember, like 69 laws in the Torah that explains the 7. I'm going like, I don't get it. You told me I don't want it. You don't want me to learn the Torah, only the 7 Noahide laws. But in order to understand fully those 7, I need to learn 69 from the Torah. It's confusing. I mean, it's like me asking a foreigner who wants to become a U.S. citizen. And this is a perfect example because we've seen the problem today. You have illegal aliens. They're coming in. They're getting all these benefits that the citizens do not get. That's unfair. That's not equitable. Why should they get benefits that the citizens do not get? We're supposed to go first. That's why Paul says to the Jew first and then the Gentile. Now, once the Gentile becomes part of the household of faith, now you don't treat him as a second-class citizen. You treat him with equity. So if a Jew learns the Torah, the Gentile who converts learns the Torah. You don't teach him, oh, just keep the 7 laws. You don't need to do anything. No, you don't treat people like that. It goes back to the same principle of the Pharisees. Oh, you're not good enough, so only do these. You don't need to do anything else. Shoo. Stay away from us. We don't want you. Well, that's not necessarily the attitude all the time. But, you got to remember that the nations are seeking after the God of Israel. And they want to embrace the Torah. The problem is that people who come from the nations. Oh, let me finish my thought on the illegal aliens. And now you have an illegal alien who comes in and they become entitled because the government gives them money, gives them a job, give them this. And then the citizens are suffering. They don't have the same benefit and they're paying taxes. Well, that makes no sense. A citizen has no right, the same rights. The illegal has the same rights as the citizen. Well, what if this citizen, this illegal guy, goes through the process of converting into an American citizen? He gets his permit, he gets his green card, he studies to become a citizen, and then once he becomes a citizen, he has an oath of allegiance. Now he is treated as a native born, although he was not born in the country. Even if he's Spanish or black or African or whatever, he was born in a different country. The moment he takes the oath, you and I should not look at him as a second-class citizen from another country. He's an American citizen. Well, the gospel is the same thing. Paul is trying to let people know, these people are coming into the good news. They want to embrace the God of Israel against all odds. They are in danger of an affront to the emperor. They can die. These people should be treated with dignity because Messiah treated everybody with dignity. He is basically going on the same line as the Messiah. You don't treat the homeless, the widows, and the strangers any lesser just because they don't have the same means like a Pharisee. And that's the contrast. You're a Pharisee. You have all this knowledge, but you don't care about the needy. Well, you lost the essence of the Torah, which is righteousness and justice. So religious mindset always puts you in a caste, put you in a place over here. And that's why I got removed from certain circles, because I saw, wait a minute, we're falling into the trap of Christianity and rabbinical Pharisaic movement back in the first century. Someone comes in really truly looking to learn, but because they cannot lift 100 pounds or warm up with 225, you're not going to warm up, you're not going to teach them. I mean, think about it though, Isaiah, from your perspective. The guy I met like almost 17, 18 years ago is not the same guy right now weightlifting. And you were big back then, but you're completely different now. So you can easily warm up with 225 pounds, 2 plates. But how many people can do that? I used to. I can't do that anymore. Well, does that mean that you're going to give up on those if they want to learn? No, you're going to teach them.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
You're going to remember when you could only lift 135, and you're going to go teach them the process to get to where you're at. Well, in the first century, the Pharisees could care less.
Plan that's not going to burn them out in the long run. You know,
Exactly. Exactly. So now you know what happened in the first century with the religious spirits. They were burning people out. So they want nothing to do with the God of Israel. And who's at fault? The leadership who's supposed to be the example. They were the problem, not God. It's them, because of the bad interpretation of the law created for people to get disheartened, to run away from the source of life, which is the Lord, instead of religion. That's what I found the last 15 years.
We singled out the Pharisees that Jesus was speaking against. We mentioned Gamaliel from the school of Hillel. Let's go back to the school of Hillel and kind of zero in on some of the similarities Jesus had to them, and perhaps reveal some, why somebody like Rabbi Harvey Falk would write a book called Jesus the Pharisee.
Yeah, I know. And you know what's interesting? When you read his book, you probably think he believed in Yeshua. Because I'm not saying he did, but when you read it, you're going like, wait a minute. He actually took the time to read the New Testament, and he saw that it's actually very Jewish. An example is when Yeshua is talking about marriage and divorce. The house of Shammai said that if your wife burned her food, that if your wife burns her food, that was ground for divorce. I can't remember exactly where it was, okay? So please. And Hillel says, I think Hillel, or one of the descendants of Hillel, can't remember, that if you found a better looking wife, you can divorce your wife. I don't think that's right. So Yeshua comes around, and in some circles, he agrees with Shammai, and in some, he agrees with Hillel. Every religion, every dogma has their faults, and there have their pluses. So what Yeshua was saying is...
If I remember, Jesus said the only grounds for divorce is adultery.
Right.
Correct.
Oh, but right, because,
Yes.
Remember, if you follow the concrete letter of the law, it tells you to have the sex is physical, right? But then you forget about covet. That's why you have the commandment that you should not covet, because everything starts with the eyesight. You may not do it physically, but you already done it in your mind, which opens the door to the physical.
Yes.
So what Yeshua is saying, guys, I get it. I know you're not doing it physically, but if you let your eye wander to start imagining what you'll do, eventually you will do whatever it takes to get it done. You would lie, you will even commit murder, whatever. Like today when we see people commit adultery, they lie, they covet, envious, they do some crazy stuff to get that done. And Yeshua is kind of redirecting them to say, let's teach the people to have self-control. You can admire a pretty woman. Oh, that's pretty. But it's completely different than saying, having this picture in your mind about what you're going to do to her, because that's the way we used to think in the world. So now we are transforming our mind to, very attractive lady, but that's it. You move on. Or just like a woman, a very attractive man, but that's it. There's nothing wrong with saying, oh, that's a very attractive person. But then you have to have the self-control of the renewal of your mind to leave it there and continue. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge for anyone. So Yeshua is trying to take us to
dwell on it and think, oh, I should take that or make it mine.
Exactly. And that's a challenge.
I believe in that. Go ahead.
You were saying? No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, I believe another similarity Jesus had with the school of Hillel was the school of Shammai. They put a strong emphasis on cleaning the outside of the cup. Jesus and Hillel put a strong emphasis on the inside of the cup. Is that correct?
Yeah, you see that in Mark chapter 7, right? In Mark 7, if you read a detail, by the way, washing of the cups and stuff like that was actually part of the temple proper. They took it out of Zechariah. But again, they're trying to put emphasis on the external. If you go to Mark chapter 7, you read the whole chapter, even here. Look, in verse 26, blind Pharisees first clean the inside of the cup and dish so that the outside may become, it says, first clean the inside of the cup and the dish so that the outside of it may become clean also. He is telling you, your issue is internal, is your heart. I mean, let me ask you a question. Have you ever met someone that on the outside, they look perfect? They say the right thing. They do the right thing. But then when you really get to know them, they're rotten as a character and the person. And you know that in the religious circles, it happens a lot.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
In the religious circles, especially leadership, you see that a lot. It's
everywhere, though, the grass is thick and there's snakes in it.
There you go. So that's the problem we're having. You know, in verse 27, he says the same. He said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you're like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but on the inside, you're full of bones, dead, everything unclean. So they are doing things on the inside that are immoral, but they look perfect on the outside. And the way they justify it is by telling people, this is the requirement of the law, to look this way and say this, even if your actions are completely different. And we see that even to this day in religious circles and everyday life. It's called hypocrisy, you know? And that's where 15 years ago I saw that I was not educating myself enough to be consistent in my actions. So I decided to start from scratch. I went back to the basics, went back to the commandments. I wanted to understand how it's done culturally, how it's done religiously, so I could have a better idea. And I focused on my family, my wife, my children, because that's our legacy, really. So what Torah has done for me and my relationship with the Messiah is redirecting my efforts to move away from what I wanted instead of what I needed. And that's the struggle every man has. I get up every morning and I'm thinking, and I say, today I want to be the best husband I could be. I want to be the best father. It's not about how much Bible I know. It's how can I live a lifestyle that reflects my relationship with God and be real. I still make mistakes. And I still, but I'm not going to justify them because I have instructions. I get up and I have to follow the instructions. And that's why uncomfortable becomes a flesh. It's, so I think that's what the whole issue with the Pharisaic movement was. The Messiah is trying to correct and bring them back to balance. Hey, guys, you have a great responsibility. You're supposed to teach the people how to live and walk. You're not doing it. Your heart is far from God. And it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. By the way, same thing happens in the book of Malachi when God is calling out the priests. I mean, you guys are priests, but yet you're taking the meat and you're taking the animals and you're giving God the defiled and the profane, and you're keeping the best for yourselves. Wait a minute. Don't you know your job is to represent God? It's correction. But unfortunately, we take these verses to attack.
Is that the same passage where he says, what is it? To fear, love mercy, fear justice?
What are you talking about in Malachi?
Live humbly. Or am I thinking about a different passage?
Yeah, you're thinking about Hosea.
Hosea, yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah. And by the way, it's the same problem. Hosea marries a prostitute. And then she has children of prostitution. And then God says, go get her. But wait a minute, the shame of remarrying a prostitute. And then he redeems her after she sells herself. I mean, it's amazing. Well, God is saying, even though you,
Oh, just culturally, like that. There's maybe a bit more leadway in secular culture today with marrying somebody of like a background like that, but back then it was totally like that was like,
oh man, I mean that would have never happened.
Taboo.
I mean, people don't realize when they read the book of Hosea that what he did carried shame to him and his children, because then his genealogy would have been questioned. And this is the reason why the command and the culture back in the day that they have to prove their virginity when they got married. And the reason why that was is because your honor was based on your name. So if your mom slept around and there was a concern of infidelity when your father was married to her and she was pregnant with you, then the whole community is going to think that you are a product of an infidelity. Thus, you're going to have shame. And because you bear the name of your father, then your line is going to be shamed. Forever, they will think that you are a bastard child or that you're not a legitimate son of this person. And that was more serious than losing all your money. So when you read the story of Hosea, you assume, wow, man, this guy married a prostitute. He only married her because God told him to. So,
Yes.
I mean, there's no possible way that in that time frame, a man will willingly go marry a prostitute knowing that his line would have been shame, he would have been a spectacle, and he would have, the suffering.
And the point of that overall was because God wanted to demonstrate his redemption correct?
That's exactly. I mean, remember that the Hosea represents a type of the Messiah. And Gomer is actually the spiritual condition of Israel. And although, she's not worthy, God sent a redeemer who paid a price for her. Stand in. That's the Messiah, to restore her honor. And then he says, I will betroth you unto you in righteousness and in justice. I will betroth, and you know that I'm your God. I'm your Baali. I'm your husband. It's a metaphor of reconciliation and restoration. That's what the message of the gospel is.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I would agree with you on that.
Yeah. So it's a really cool story if you understand the backdrop.
So like when we're introduced to the Pharisees, or when there's a mention in like the Gospel of John wherein it just refers to the Jews. It's like, well, there's like 12 different kinds. What kind are you talking about? 12 different sects within first century Judaism.
Yeah.
How many did you mention?
Well, Pharisees, there were 7 types. But there are 2 schools within the Pharisaic movement. And then you have Pharisees, the Sadducees, Herodians, which was a political movement. Then you have the Essenes. Then you have the Sicarii, Revolutionary Guard. Then you have the Nazarene. I mean, you have all these different types of beliefs within the first century. All that had in common was basically the Torah. But can you imagine living in that world, expecting a Messiah? So the Herodians, they didn't want the Messiah because that meant they lost the power of Herod.
But people don't think about that. They kind of broad brush anybody. Like, it's easy for a Christian to think like, there's the Baptists, there's the Pentecostals, there's Presbyterians, but when it's like another group that you're hearing mentioned, you don't think about the diversity. And so it takes away from the context of who Jesus was really talking about.
Right.
When he was talking about this with the Pharisees. And there's actually bigger rifts. There's Pharisees who said things that were in line with what Jesus was teaching. Right. I wanted to ask you shortly. I have just about two more questions that might take a decent amount of time, but with your studying of the history of early Christianity, the world in the first century, the narrative that we have in the New Testament of what the apostles and the disciples were saying and teaching, being in alignment, or that at least that's how people often perceive it. Was there likewise division and disagreement within the disciples of Jesus?
Absolutely.
Right off the bat?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in Galatians chapter 2, verse 11, Paul calls out Peter because Peter understand that the whole Yeshua movement is actually bringing the message to the nations. understand that the Jews have been abused by the nations. But there's a prophecy in the book of Genesis, or a promise by God, that in you, in regards to Abraham, God says, in you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. So Yeshua now opens the gospel, the good news, deliverance from death, not only to Israel, but also to all the nations. Well, that's going to create a little riffraff because, for example, the Jews considered the Gentiles pigs, dirty, unclean, undesirable. And according to the Torah law, yes, they were. They were outside of covenant. Okay? So Peter goes to dealing with the Galatians, and there he's treating them as second-class citizens because a group of believers in Yeshua who were Pharisees, and that's what Acts 15 is about, they are telling them, the Gentiles, you're not true Jews unless you get circumcised to be saved. And basically, Paul is challenging them, saying, no, salvation is by faith. Circumcision is a sign of a covenant. You are imposing on these people, again, you are imposing on these people who are beginning to walk in this, things that even you yourselves cannot do. Again, let's go back to the whole metaphor of weightlifting. You're lifting 300 pounds. I used to do that when I was a baseball player back in the 90s. There's no way I'm going to lift 300 pounds today. But I'll tell you what, if you give me a workout program and you give me 1 year and I'm consistent and build it up again, there is a possibility that I could do it again. But it takes a while.
Oh, yeah.
So, because I already did it. So I'm conditioned. I just have to go back from scratch,
Yes.
But how can you impose that on somebody who's never lifted weight before? It's incredible. I will take you to task. Isaiah, what are you doing? You're going to hurt this person. They're going to get disappointed. They're never going to lift weights again.
They're not going to want to.
It's the same thing.
They're going to get burned out right off the bat.
So in the first century, the issue with Cornelius was an example like that. Peter didn't want to go. It was because of the vision that he went. It's like, I see a sheet coming from heaven, and it has all kinds of animals. He did not understand. The text says that for three times he questioned it, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a knock on the door, and there's some Romans. He goes, I get it. The pigs, the Romans. Yes. Now he goes with them, but only because of the vision. So, of course, there is a disconnect, and that prevailed all the way through the Nazarene Council. And then later on, the Council of Nicaea, in which the Catholic Church was established, and there was a rupture of relationship within anything Jewish. So that was the culmination of this whole thing, should we follow Torah or not?
Yes. And so that would lead into my final question. So what led me to deconstruct out of religion, out of, that's how I know you from, I was part of the Messianic Hebrew Roots movement. And
you were extremely adamant and very passionate about it. And then I wonder what happened.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, it started back when I heard your teaching on the School of Hillel and Shammai. I got this hunger to know the scriptures
in a deeper,
a cultural, No, I'm not saying that.
I got you. I know what you're saying, though. I know what you're saying.
I wanted to understand it deeper, more broadly, because that teaching just kind of opened my eyes to, we don't get this perception reading the New Testament that there was Jews, rabbis that lined up with what he was teaching, maybe would even make one wonder if he came from that school, and then it's evident who he was criticizing when we study that in context. I had read, obviously I haven't done the extent of study that you have in this context, but that is what leads me to my question is studying it from a historical perspective, what scholars are saying about it. Bart Ehrman, I'm sure you're familiar with his work. He was one that was pretty pivotal. Bart Ehrman. He's a New Testament scholar.
Okay. Is he a minimalist?
Define a minimalist.
There's a maximalist and there's a minimalist in the scholarly world. They don't use those terms anymore, but I continue to use them. They study the Bible to minimize God and the validity of the Bible, and the other ones, they study and they find validity within it. So there's both sides. I read both sides. And many people, they stumble when they go into people who write books questioning the validity of the Bible without the understanding of the fullness of the context. And many people go that route. And I know because I know many people who study, and I'm going like, why are you going? Everything that I read brings me closer to God. What happened? And then they always find something to doubt about, and they're so focused on that little thing that they don't understand, then they say, well, that means that everything else is not real. And they moved away from it. I confronted that situation about 16, 17 years ago, in which there was something that I was not really fully understanding. And I remember going to the Lord, and I began to ask in prayer, I said, Lord, I know Yeshua's Messiah, and I know that he is, but there's certain things about his messiahship that I don't quite understand yet. But I read, I get it, I understand it. But I said, Lord, my questions here, I'm going to put over here in my bookshelf, in my mind. And in due time, as I continue to develop and study, in your time, you're going to reveal it to me. And about 6 years later, I found that answer to that question. But I proved myself to be loyal to where I was. And then now I believe in Yeshua more than ever. More than ever. I mean, I know now, I could tell you if I could use this. Let me put it this way. If Yeshua is not the Messiah, whoever wrote the New Testament was the most amazing genius in the world to deceive everybody. Because now that I've gone into Greece, Turkey, Rome, studied imperial cult, studied patron-client relationship, reciprocity, and the caste system, Roman law, and all the stuff that I've been studying for the last 10 years, when I went back to Turkey this year and Greece, I finally understood the message of the gospel is so profound that I think the church doesn't get it. And Hebrew roots, they don't even care because they argue about, flat earth and, the sacred names and calendars. They missed the boat. And I finally understand the core message of the Bible, in which the only thing the Torah cannot do, the only thing the Torah, and by the way, Acts 15 tells you, and Galatians 3:21 tells you, the Torah by itself cannot do is provide eternal life. Because everyone dies. Moses died. Abraham died. These were righteous people. They made mistakes, but they were righteous people. They all died. So
and I don't think that's usually not even the approach to why, like, in the Torah, it's not given as an antidote to eternal life.
Well, exactly.
It's an antidote to receive blessings as opposed to curses.
Right, because it's a covenantal relationship. You're married.
Yes.
If you behave and you do what is right, you don't go out sleeping around.
It's going to be a peaceful
You're going to have
home.
a structure. You're going to have a marriage.
Yes.
So you have to follow the basic principles. It's a relationship.
But
so
if I am not a good man, and if I do not abide by my values, then it's going to create, the land
chaos.
is going to be filled with curses and chaos.
Right. So what is the greatest curse that occurred to humanity?
The greatest curse that would occur to humanity?
Yeah. What is the one thing everyone is afraid of?
Am I frozen on your screen, by the way?
Yeah, you are.
Go
ahead and close your camera and come back on.
I don't even know how to do that.
Go to the bottom left. You have a mic and you have a little camera. Click on the camera and it'll go off like me, and then click it again and it come back on. There you go.
All right.
Click it again. Did you click it?
I did.
Yeah, go back again and hit it on. You see like a little X, and then it'll come back.
Front camera.
It's okay. Just keep asking me the question. I'll answer here.
That's so weird.
Yeah. So what happens, Isaiah, is that death is the only thing that the Torah could not have a solution. It's all at the mercy of God. And that's why the New Testament says, for the righteousness of God, apart from the law, has been revealed. God has given us a pardon. If you exchange, in exchange for what? For your loyalty. He says, if you serve me and you follow my principles and my values and you do righteousness and justice, then I'll give you a gift. It's salvation. So the whole salvation from what? From death. You know? And the thing is that when you read the New Testament, it's consistent throughout that God defeated death through the resurrection. Unfortunately, we don't spend enough time. And you know how I learned it? Through the study of the temple. When I began to really study the temple, I realized, wait a minute, the temple represents life. Everything outside is the realm of death. So basically, it's a microcosm of Eden, and God teaching us how to approach him. That's it.
So that was the point of my question. I was getting to that seemingly or coming at the Old Testament and the New Testament from the approach of scholars, academics. It created it created this narrative that was almost unseeable of certain ideas getting picked, certain ideas not getting picked, to, like, especially in the New Testament, you know, with the Council of Nicaea, there were ideas about Christ that they wanted to propagate, ideas like the Ebionites. They were a sect of Christians who had some views very different, perhaps more Jewish than the later result that we got. And I don't want to, I'm not looking to like debate and discuss the details. My question is, for me, it led me into skepticism. How have you, throughout the years of being a teacher, studying many of these same things, you seem to have a faith that has not diminished as a byproduct of that? Right.
Well, I mean, that's because what I decided to do was open-minded enough to understand the biblical themes. Let me ask you a question. Perfect example. And I've asked this even to rabbis in Israel in conversation. Judaism and Christianity, they believe in resurrection, right?
Yes, correct? yes.
Okay.
I forgot that, by the way, this isn't going to be a video podcast. This is only going to be audio, so it's not a problem that
my face don't worry. All right.
But I thought you saw me nodding. Yes.
Okay. So what's interesting is that in the 5 books of Moses, you do not find one verse that literally says that when you die, you're going to resurrect. But yet, every Orthodox believes in resurrection. Uh-huh. And Christians. Mm-hmm. And you only know about resurrection when you read a few verses in the prophets. Yeah. But in the 5 books of Moses, there's not a verse. But yet, when Paul would go into the synagogues, he says he will teach about the death, burial, and resurrection as the Torah and the prophets say. And I think, wait a minute. That was, for me, the crux of my faith. When I read that like 15 years ago, and I'm going like, wait a second. So how can I prove that Yeshua was going to die, resurrect, when there's not one verse that talks about resurrection, literally using the word resurrection? Yeah. Well, when I began to look into the ancient world, the ancient Near East. Okay, so Moses lived in Abraham lived in this time frame. Let's go from the beginning. Noah lived in this time frame. And Abraham lived in this time frame. Then Isaac and Jacob in this time frame. Then you have Joseph. Then you have Moses. You have. So what I did, I began to study the time frames where those people lived, and I began to study everything related to their environment, their culture, their language, their everything, flora, fauna, geography, topography, everything. Then I understood the message. So then I read Genesis 1:1. It says, on the God created the heavens and the earth, and then and the heavens and the earth were empty, right? And the earth was empty and void, right?
Yes, yes.
But then it says, and the Spirit of the Lord hovered over the waters of the earth. And I'm going like, wait a minute. It just told me that the heavens and the earth was empty and void, and that he created the heavens and the earth. Why does it have to tell me that the Spirit of God hovers over the waters of the sea? Who cares? And that's what prompted me to look into the Mesopotamian history, Egyptian mythology, Canaanite mythology, and then I found the answer. That the whole thing about the Spirit of God having dominion over waters is actually resurrection message. Because they believed that whomever had control under of the sea, controlled chaos. Whoever had dominion over the sea monster, the Bible calls it Leviathan. Mm-hmm. In the ancient world, they call it Tiamat.
And Marduk.
By the Mesopotamians.
Marduk
and the Canaanites, they call it Yam or Mot. Whoever had dominion over the sea was considered to be the creator and the sovereign of the world. So now you understand why Yeshua walked on water. He didn't have to walk on water to be Messiah. So why did he walk on water? Because God sent him to bring the message that the Creator would have dominion over the underworld. That's why Peter fell on the water. And Peter says, save me. And he was saved. That's the message of resurrection. You see? So I asked you a question about resurrection and the proof of it in the 5 books of Moses. And because it doesn't line up with our language, the word resurrection, we assume is not there. But when I went to the cultural background, it's permeating throughout the whole 5 books of Moses. And that's why I believe in the God of Israel the way I do. Because the evidence is there. We just have to be patient to look into it and understand that they lived in the real world, in a real environment with real people. Not everything's perfect. You have to figure out the culture, the language to know the message.
As a byproduct of studying the Bible in the broader sense that we're talking about, I also wrote off seeing God in a personal way. Like many years throughout the years, I was Messianic even. It started out as your typical Messianic Hebrew roots fellow. Near the end, I really started to lean more towards Noahide. I started putting more of an emphasis on the Bible from a rabbinical perspective as opposed to a New Testament perspective. Then from an academic perspective, that kind of took me out of it. And along with that, I wrote off, my point of bringing up all that was throughout the times of my beliefs changing and perhaps putting less of an emphasis on Jesus or Yeshua, I still at various times felt this fire. I felt I prayed to God, and I felt this relationship I had with him. But in the process of writing off the narratives, or the narrative of who God is that the Bible presents, I wrote off God also in a personal way. And recently, through a variety of interesting circumstances, I've recently started to approach God in a personal way. When I say God, I don't know who God is. I see it. It's like an ant in a lot of ways. Like ants can experience the results of humans, being around humans. We can step on them. We can build them an ant farm. They can experience us, but they don't know anything about us. So my takeaway now currently is that I do believe the authors in the Bible, they were experiencing something divine, something sublime. But given the varying examples, descriptions that don't seem the same, they perhaps had different authors had a different perspective. I do believe they were experiencing something, but they wrote much from their perspective, who they were as a person. Me and you could experience something amazing and divine happening in front of us and write about it. And there would be much of us in our writings. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
our culture, our biases.
I mean, it's only logical. I mean, why not? I mean, you got to remember the Bible is not written in a vacuum. The Bible is written around a real culture with real feelings and people making mistakes. That's the whole point of the written of the narrative.
Yes.
It's trying to teach you that Abraham was not a perfect man. He was a righteous and moral, but he still made mistakes. It's telling you the same thing about Joseph. Joseph was immature when he was 17 years old. The Joseph that you saw when he was 30, when he went through all the years of bad experiences, is not the same Joseph that left his brothers when they threw him in the pit. The whole story is to teach us the humanity of people and how we are dysfunctional and how we need God.
The human predicament.
Right. But yet, in all of this, Joseph showed that he was faithful even though in adversity. And he didn't give up on God, although he was slaved and he was falsely accused. And he was, everywhere he went, although he was always being accused, he always prospered because he was loyal. And that's the whole idea. Look, we could take any kind of doubt and say, is God real? That's easy to do.
I don't doubt that God's real at all.
I understand. But then again, why would I serve a God that I've never met? I don't even know. I mean, the reason why I serve the God of Israel and I'm loyal is because in my life I've seen how the values that I've learned in his instructions in the Bible is making me a better person, a better husband, a better father, a better friend. I still make mistakes, but I have an opportunity not to create chaos anymore like I used to. And when I study now, I see a real God who wants to have fellowship with me through his laws and his commandments. And what I love about the Torah is that there's no guessing game. He tells you, hey man, keep the Sabbath. I want to meet with you on Friday night. And you're going to bless your children. You're going to have a meal with me, and I'll bless you. Just let them know that I'm your king and I'm your redeemer, and I'll give you the blessing, double portion. There you go. Hey, keep Passover. Remind everyone that I redeemed you. Keep Pentecost. Remind everyone that I delivered you and I give you freedom. Hey, keep Yom Teruah, that I'm your king. Yom Kippur, I'm your judge. And then
You froze up.
unfortunately, we live in the world.
Hey, Rico, you froze up for like 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you and see you now. Yes.
Now, what I'm saying is that I believe in the God of Israel, and he has given me instructions, and then humanity and the behavior delineates how amazing God is in his instructions. It keeps me from chaos. Now, we all have doubts. I mean, think about this. If the UFOs are real, if they're real, I mean, you know what that's going to do to everybody?
That's going to complicate some narratives.
But wait a minute. Well, then think about it. I believe Yeshua is not of this world now, and the God of Israel doesn't dwell here. I mean, it says that what if there is a parallel world? I don't know. There's a Jerusalem in the heavens. I don't know if that's a metaphor that is true. But what if it is? I mean, then think about how narrow-minded we have to be to think that we're the only ones alone in this world.
Yes.
I mean, does that annul God's sovereignty and his power? No. It's just that we are basically created to deal with this environment.
Yes.
Maybe in due time, maybe the coming of Messiah is going to be the awakening to realize that the universe is bigger than we thought and that we belong to him. You follow?
Yes.
And then we'll be able to accept everything that comes with it. In the meantime, I'm just worried to stay alive because in this earth here, there's death.
Yes.
And God says, I want my people to live because I'm a God of life. So the message is really simple. I don't care about the universe right now because I'm dealing with something in this earth that I don't know how to deal with, which is death. Every single person is afraid of it.
Yes.
And there's no cure. Well, the Bible now tells you what the cure is. You believe that God is the only one who gives you life. And then he'll say, okay, I'll give you the gift of eternal life in exchange for your loyalty. For what purpose? To let everybody know that I'm here, that I'm true. And through the word, you're going to see revelations of who I am. And that's where faith comes in. The faith is, I believe you. Because this is way too big to be just out of nothing. Mm. You know what I mean?
Yes. And I wholeheartedly do believe that there is something greater, more mysterious than us. I believe that he hears me when I pray. I experienced something that I personally feel like is something like the still small voice that Elijah experienced, you know?
I think what I sense from you and what I sense from many people who follow the same path as you have, I don't think that you're mad at God or you're mad at religion. You got tired of all the hoopla, and then they tell you something, and then all of a sudden it's not what they told you, and then not everybody is the same. I mean, some people get lied to and they continue to move forward. Some people get lied to, and then once they find out, they get wounded, they get upset, and they question everything, and that's not wrong either. But the way that you respond to it, everyone's different. You follow?
Yes.
So, I mean, for me, the more I study, I have doubts about everything. Well, I'm not running away. I'm going to keep searching. And you know what? The more I keep searching, the more evidence I find. And I can tell you this right now, without a shadow of a doubt, that I believe more than ever that Yeshua is the Messiah and that there is a God, the God of Israel. Because everything that I've studied points to it. And unfortunately, many people, they don't spend the time to research it with an open mind to know that the Bible was written by real people. They're going to make mistakes. You know, but then you have the guy who reads the Bible and says, oh, the book of First Kings doesn't line up with the Chronicles. I'm going like, wait a minute. Chronicles was written maybe about 100 years after? I mean...
I would say the thing that I've written off is loyalty to a particular narrative.
That's fair. Because we had the narrative of the church and we abandoned that. In Judaism, we abandon that, but we don't have to abandon God and his instructions.
Yes.
You know, that's different.
I haven't written, like, despite all that, I still have this deep internal itch to discuss these narratives, you know? That's what I try to put an emphasis on this podcast is...
Yeah, I got you.
Me and you we're sitting down, we're discussing a narrative that many people go by, and we're discussing it in a broader context. I want to understand these narratives in a deeper, broader context. I've written off loyalty to, like, say, the outcome, the answer has to be this particular one. Because at the end of the day, I still believe, regardless of what I find out, life is still going to have meaning. And there still is a God who I believe answers my prayers, though I don't think I know or understand much about him.
Well, but who does?
Yes.
I mean, you know, God is wise in that he gave us instructions.
Yes.
Because he will know that if we have too much time on our hands to try to figure him out, we will give up because we can't. But as we follow his instructions and we see the fruit of the relationship, and we see the fruit of a covenantal relationship, then what happens is 1 + 1 is 2, and 2 + 2 is 4. As eventually you start adding up and you're going like, cannot be a coincidence. So I think what ruins everything is religion. But the Bible's about values. It's not about religion. It's about values.
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
But
and I think those are two things where me and you can definitely find common ground. The importance of discussing the narrative, understanding it deeper and more broadly. And because we believe life has meaning, it's very important to be good.
So let me ask you this last question before I go, because I have to leave right now. But let me ask you this.
Yes.
What is the number one question in humanity is what? How to obtain what?
And are you asking me what do I want to obtain?
What is the only thing you're afraid of? Well, we already talked about that before. Because we don't know what's coming if we die, right?
I would say not living a full life here where I
Yeah, well, that's what
neglected. I do believe there's things that individual is meant to do. I believe in purpose. And I would say the worst thing that I could do, the biggest mistake I could make, is to live a bad life, to be a bad person, to live foolishly, and
Yeah,
to
because
not live alignment with what my purpose is as an individual.
perfect.
So
Okay.
I don't ask why are we here. I've been asking a smaller question, but still greatly as big in my opinion. Why am I here?
Okay. So, but however, even with that, which is we all do that, have goals. No one wants to die. We don't know we don't know that's the mystery. It's like when you're born. When you're born, you came from nowhere.
Yes.
And then you're in the womb, and you come out of the womb, and poof, there's life. But then you start dying the moment you come up. You come out. That's a weird thing. The moment you come out, there's life, but you start dying.
Yes.
So if you go back to the Bible, and this will be a challenge to you because I know you will try. Go back and review the Bible from beginning without any affiliation of any religion, just the information. And read the purpose and the function of creation. But you cannot do it just by reading the text because the text was not written to you.
Yes.
The text was written to a people who understood the environment where they came out of.
Yes.
Start studying their environment. You're going to notice there's a distinction between the Bible and the way that it's written and to whom it was written versus the purpose of what the nations believed. And it's all about the contrast between death and life. And what I see in the Bible and the God of Israel in everything that I read is always the emphasis is on life. And that's the God that I want to serve.
Yes. Yes. Me too.
All right, man.
Me too.
And by the way, and the reason why we need the Messiah is not because of the way the Christians preached it. It's actually that God says, I want you to have access to me, although you and I do not deserve it. Yes. Because we dead. We are removed from the presence of God because of our condition. And the presence of God cannot be death. The temple teaches you that. That's why Romans says, because through one man all die, one man shall all come alive. And Corinthians said the same thing too. So what does God do? He establishes a precedent. Mm-hmm. Okay, Moses on Mount Sinai, Moses said, blot me out, but please forgive those people. They worship the golden calf, and yet Moses says, I'd rather die than for the nations to say that you do not keep your word. That establishes what is called a ransom. Mm-hmm. Okay? Then later on, you see the cities of refuge. A guy commits involuntary manslaughter. And now he has to go get rescued because the family wants to kill him. He shed blood. He goes to the cities of refuge, and he is safe if he stays in the city. And then when the priest dies, he is free. There's no more death penalty. Oh, that's why the book of Hebrews presents the Messiah as a high priest. That through his death, we have been delivered from the sin that Adam created, that I'm guilty of, although I've never done anything wrong to anybody. That's why we die. All of a sudden now Isaiah, now all of a sudden the message is one message. How God wants to restore humanity back to the garden. And in order to do so, we have to be in the realm of life. That's one thing that I do not understand. Why would God be willing to do that when he has the power to annihilate us completely and start from scratch? Why would he keep his word to do that for us? Why are we that special? And that's what motivates me to value my life, because he has the power to destroy it, and yet he gives me the opportunity to serve him by sending his son so I can have access to him.
Yes.
Anyway, hey man, thank you for having me. This was really fun, by the way. I really
thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. If you're open to it in the future, perhaps I would be open to, or I would be definitely be interested in having you on the podcast again.
Anytime, buddy. You let me know. We'll get together.
All right. Let me say my so long to the audience. Thank you for sitting in on another episode. Let's keep traversing this strange world with inquisitiveness, and let's remember to be neighborly to everybody, because at the end of the day, we're all strangers in a strange land. So until next time, everybody, peace. Thank you for coming on, Rico. It meant a whole lot to me.
I enjoyed it, man, and thanks for the questions, and thanks for hearing me out.
All right. Well, you have a blessed feast.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you would like to contact us, email us at peaceandtoodles@gmail.com. Until next time, salutations, my fellow strangers.
What will they think of next?